In episode 35, Orchestrate penetration tests that deliver actionable evidence, we set the tone the payment card industry professional (PCIP) exam expects. A penetration test must answer scoping questions and drive measurable security improvements, not merely produce a colorful report. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard (PCI DSS) treats testing as proof that boundaries hold and that controls resist plausible attack chains under realistic conditions. So our job as assessors is to recognize when a test was framed to produce evidence, not theater. That begins with a clear promise. We will design engagements that prove or disprove segmentation, show exploitability where it matters, and connect each finding to owners, changes, and retests the moment results land. The outcome we prize is traceability, from objective to method to artifact to remediation, so anyone can replay the result months later without a guided tour. With that promise, penetration testing becomes a repeatable way to narrow scope honestly, surface weak assumptions, and tune monitoring to see the things that matter most. Actionable tests start with objectives written as questions that a reviewer can answer yes or no using artifacts, not opinions. For segmentation validation, the question might be, can a credentialed user in a non-cardholder segment laterally reach any service in the cardholder data environment directly or via management planes? For exploitability, we ask, does a current public vulnerability on an internet-exposed asset permit code execution or credential theft that leads to business-meaningful access? For privilege escalation, we probe, can a standard user become an administrator within the same domain or assume privileged cloud roles? For data access, we define, can an attacker read, exfiltrate, or tamper with cardholder data or tokens from in-scope stores? Each objective anchors the test plan, the tooling choices, and the evidence we will require, packets, screenshots, command logs, and precise timestamps. When objectives read like testable questions, findings naturally present as answered claims tied to artifacts rather than as generic severities. Rules of engagement turn intent into safe, repeatable practice. We specify timelines, daily communication windows, and crisp, in-scope asset lists that distinguish production, staging, and lab systems. We define permitted techniques, e.g. phishing simulations to pre-approved groups, password spraying with caps, exploitation only in maintenance windows, and explicitly forbid actions that could corrupt data or disrupt billing flows. We name emergency stop conditions with 24/7 contacts who can pause activity in minutes. And we require testers to tag every action with a ticket or campaign identifier so logs and alerts can be traced without guesswork. We also set evidence rules before a single packet flies. No unauthenticated screenshots of sensitive data saved outside controlled storage. No ad hoc tools that skip logging. No privilege changes without paired artifacts. With rules this concrete, operations can breathe, security can watch, and leadership knows the test will answer the right questions without creating new problems. Independence and transparency determine how much weight a report will carry. Testers must be independent of control owners to avoid confirmation bias, and their qualifications should be visible. Recognized certifications matter less than demonstrated method discipline and repeatability. We require method transparency. Scoping notes, target lists, attack graphs, and command logs that another professional could rerun on a fresh day and reach the same conclusions. When testers propose unsafe shortcuts, we decline. We want exploit chains that reflect feasible attacker effort and business reality, not proof-of-concept stunts that would never survive noise and change. Independence does not mean ignorance. Testers should engage with architects to understand intended boundaries, but they must record that intent and then test the truth without handholding. Transparency and independence together create reports that become training tools for defenders rather than trophies for a shelf. A credible engagement spans internal, external, and application layers and uses realistic authentication paths that reflect how attackers actually move. External testing covers internet-exposed assets, web front ends, remote access gateways, cloud control planes, and chases chains from initial foothold to meaningful access. Internal testing begins from the perspective of a compromised workstation or service account and asks whether lateral movement, relay, or token theft can pierce segmentation or escalate privilege. Application testing blends both black box and authenticated approaches, using the roles your users hold to probe authorization boundaries, business logic, and hidden administrative paths. Across all layers, the test should mimic the sequence a patient adversary would follow: recon, foothold, escalation, lateral movement, and data access. We are not measuring creativity for its own sake. We are measuring whether your defenses break the chain before the blast radius touches cardholder data or privileged control. Provide testers with architecture notes and known constraints so time goes into meaningful probes, not rediscovering well-documented terrain. Share network diagrams that show security groups and firewalls, a high-level data flow for cardholder processes, identity maps for admin paths, and a list of shared services, backup, monitoring, directory that could create blind bypasses. Offer platform limits, maintenance windows, load balancer behaviors, rate limits, without seeding exploit specifics. We are not handing out answers, we are shortening the distance to realistic tests. This pre-brief reduces false positives because testers can align what they see against design intent, and it surfaces misconfigurations that design docs forgot to capture. The exam lens values this balance: enough context to make attacks meaningful, not so much that you invalidate independence. A well-briefed tester will often find deeper flaws faster, and your team will learn more from the path they document. Mandate evidence standards that turn every claim into something a stranger can verify. Each finding must include the exact steps, inputs, and outputs, the packets or HTTP transcripts, the screenshots or terminal captures, and UTC timestamps that line up across systems. If credentials were captured, the report should show where, how, and under what conditions, with hashes or tokens stored and handled per procedure. If a privilege was escalated, we expect before and after proofs, group membership, role assumptions, or effective permissions demonstrated on a sensitive action. If data access occurred, the report must prove the path, the controls bypassed, and the scope of data touched without copying live cardholder data into tester vaults. Evidence this discipline is not bureaucracy. It is how reports become blueprints for remediation, regression tests for retests, and teaching material for teams who did not sit in the room. Segmentation validation deserves explicit, repeatable checks. Testers should attempt lateral movement across the exact boundaries you claim: user subnets to CDE subnets, jump zones to admin ports, monitoring networks to managed hosts, and especially management planes that see everything. Each attempt should name the source, destination, protocol, identity used, and expected enforcement point, then preserve packet captures and device logs that prove deny rules fired with a rule identifier. Where identity-aware policies exist, the test should show how role changes alter reach and whether denials remain consistent during maintenance windows. The report must call out any path that succeeded unexpectedly and trace the why. Stale allow lists, shadow routes, overlooked service accounts, or quiet exceptions that drifted into permanence. When segmentation tests read like answered questions with artifacts, scope discussions become calm, evidence-based decisions instead of debate. Not every red flag is equally important, so prioritize findings by business impact, exploit chain depth, and feasible attacker effort. Business impact comes first. Does the issue jeopardize cardholder data, payment availability, or privileged control of in-scope systems? Chain depth matters next. A flaw that completes an existing path to the CDE outranks a flaw that requires 3 speculative leaps. Feasible effort matters because attackers favor reliability. A brittle race condition on an internal admin tool is less urgent than a robust credential exposure on a widely used service. We categorize findings with this triad and map each to an owner and a target fix date keyed to severity and asset class. This ranking system aligns remediation with risk instead of with headline severity alone, which is exactly the judgment the PCIP exam expects you to exercise. Remediation must be planned before the report ships, not after. Build Sprint Zero into the engagement. As high-impact chains emerge, pull owners into brief working sessions to agree on near-term mitigations, patch windows, rollbacks, and retest checkpoints. Capture each fix path in change tickets that reference the finding identifier, list the configuration or code diffs, and attach the testing steps the pen testers used so defenders can validate locally. Where fixes require vendor updates or complex rewrites, define compensating controls and monitoring boosts that reduce exposure now with expiry dates and named approvers so exceptions remain bounded. The report's executive summary should include this sprint plan by name, date, and owner, transforming what we found into what we will change without pause. Evidence-driven remediation sprints are how penetration tests become catalysts rather than annual rituals. Demand crisp reporting that teaches as it proves. Good reports open with a plain language narrative of the test story. What paths were tried, which defenses stopped progress, where controls fell short. Then present findings with 4 consistent elements: affected assets, steps to reproduce, evidence artifacts, and clear validation procedures for retest. Screenshots and command logs should be labeled in the same order as the steps, with captions that say what each artifact proves. Appendices should include target lists, tool versions, and hashes of exploit binaries used so future retests can match conditions. Remove filler and jargon. Add context about why a fix matters operationally. A crisp report lets owners act, lets auditors sample without confusion, and lets your team convert lessons into training slides and playbook improvements quickly. Tie results to control updates, training needs, and monitoring improvements so lessons survive the week. If an exploit bypassed multi-factor authentication because a legacy protocol stayed enabled, update standards and hardening baselines and attach the diffs that implement the new rule. If a chain succeeded because admins used broad roles, refine least privilege templates and require short-lived elevation paths. Then schedule a quick awareness session for teams that manage identities. If a path went undetected, write a detection rule that would have fired on the tester's steps, prove it with replayed logs, and add the rule to your monitoring evidence pack with owner and review cadence. By connecting each finding to a durable change control, training, or telemetry, you turn the report into permanent risk reduction rather than a one-time fix list. Store artifacts securely and map each finding to applicable requirements for clean downstream references in the Report on Compliance (ROC) and Attestation of Compliance (AOC). Evidence storage needs access controls, retention policies, and audit trails. Treat tester deliverables like sensitive data because they often contain credentials, configuration exports, and screen captures of privileged paths. For each finding, attach the relevant PCI DSS requirement numbers and the compensating control narratives, if any, so assessors can link the result to the section they must write without translation. Keep a retest folder with before and after artifacts labeled by date and environment so the closure story reads as one continuous thread. Organized evidence shortens audits and helps new team members understand the program's evolution. Because real environments are noisy and time-box tests never touch every edge, keep engagement communications tight throughout the window. Require a daily checkpoint where testers share current hypotheses, blockers, and early wins. Invite control owners to hear the story and prepare fixes even before the final report. Track anomalies that emerge during testing, alerts that fired as expected, alerts that stayed silent, or alarms that drowned out signals, and convert those observations into tuning tasks on the monitoring backlog. If emergency stops were triggered, record the event, root cause, and what changed before resuming. This cadence keeps trust high and ensures the test remains a learning exercise for both sides rather than a black box verdict delivered weeks later. Penetration testing is also a scope management tool, so treat its conclusions as inputs to your boundary assertions. When tests confirm that jump hosts enforce admin paths with multi-factor authentication, that management networks cannot reach data planes without a broker, or that guest wireless cannot talk to any CDE asset, attach those proofs to your segmentation evidence pack. When tests find a bypass, update the scope narrative the same day and start the compensating control clock with an expiry. Scope must reflect truth, not aspiration. This habit, letting tests rewrite scope promptly, demonstrates the integrity examiners look for and prevents surprises during external scanning or on-site validation. Close the operational loop the moment findings land. Book the next retest window while the context is fresh, ideally within the sprint that contains the top fixes, and put the calendar invites into owners' hands before energy fades. Assign the top 3 remediation items immediately. One that breaks a full exploit chain to the CDE, one that closes a privilege escalation, and one that hardens a boundary control that failed silently. Pair each with a rollback plan, a monitoring check you will use to watch it in production, and the exact validation steps the pen testers will run on retest. Announce these assignments in a short, plain message to stakeholders with links to tickets and dates. Momentum matters. The fastest way to turn a good report into a better posture is to move while everyone still remembers the path. When you orchestrate penetration tests this way, You create a living assurance cycle that examiners recognize as mature practice. Objectives are questions with answers. Rules of engagement protect operations and evidence. Independence and method transparency make results credible. Layers and off-paths mirror real adversaries. Artifacts make claims reproducible. Prioritization aligns to risk. Sprints turn findings into fixes. Crisp reports teach. Improvements harden controls and sharpen telemetry. Secure storage and requirement mapping smooth audits. Communication keeps trust. And immediate retests lock in progress. The thread through all of it is traceability. Who acted, what changed, where it was recorded, and when it was verified. Keep that thread strong, and your tests will do more than pass requirements. They will cut risk you can measure and defend. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.